Hey everyone, this is Julian with Behind Company Lines. Thank you for joining us today. We are interviewing Troy Bannister, founder of Particle Health. Particle is shaping the new standard for healthcare data exchange with a user-friendly API platform. Troy, I'm so excited to chat with you, especially as we were talking before the show, is a lot of people have a similar problem, and it's crazy that it expands across socioeconomic status, even like political status or what have you, is this challenge to get access to information or even for people to communicate within this healthcare industry. And really, I'm curious to see how you're bringing that information together, how you're creating the access so that people can really utilize the information that they have, but also get better care and all the positive results from that. But before we get into all that, what were you doing before you started the company?
Yeah. Before the company, I guess going back, I've always been an entrepreneur. I started cleaning boats in high school. I lived on a little island outside of Seattle. And I kind of realized like, you know what? I don't have to go to the grocery store and bag groceries all day. I can kind of do whatever I want if I start my own
Yeah.
business. So I learned that early, but I ended up falling in love with medicine. I worked in an ambulance for a while, ended up going to med school, clinical research, and then was in venture capital before I started Particle.
Yeah. What brought you to that experience? What in particular about healthcare was fascinating and wanted you to pursue it? Because as an entrepreneur, it's not necessarily the most attractive in terms of a scalability or growth standpoint. So
Yeah.
why in particular was healthcare?
I think it's a combination of how hard and complicated it is. There's just a never ending maze of things to learn.
Yeah.
And then the second side of it is the actual impact on human lives. Like
Yeah.
when I worked in an ambulance for 4 years and I was with people during the worst moments of their life and having the ability to change that for them and give them hope and give them a way to continue living their life. It was a very magical thing. Right? It's amazing. And I thought, man, if you can do that scale with technology, that's something worth spending time on.
Yeah. And I think we think about healthcare as a huge, robust machine, and it's hard to kind of create change. But there's a lot of change coming not only with what you're working on, but with a lot of healthcare for technology companies. And what in particular are you seeing in terms of these founders or these products overcoming the challenge of this kind of like legacy industry that's had all these systems for so long?
So I think we're set to spend something like $4 trillion on US healthcare this year, like insane amounts of money. And still we have some of the worst health outcomes in the world. Infant mortality is like very, very low and cost of care is very, very high. So why is that? There's a ton of inefficiencies and there's a lot of systems in place that are really old and very hard to change. All these entrepreneurs that are coming to the table, and there's many, many new startups in the healthcare space. They're all trying to figure out what these inefficiencies are and try to solve for them one by one. And so from my perspective, one of the core inefficiencies in healthcare is the inability to share information.
Yeah.
There's no internet for healthcare, right? There's no one-stop shop to go collect information on a person. And because of that, we have to fill out a chart, a piece of paper every time we go to the doctor. And we have to get the same lab test 2 weeks in a row because they can't get the results from A to B. There's just inefficiencies everywhere because of information sharing problems. So to me, information sharing is the core issue of healthcare. If you can fix it, it kind of flips everything upside down.
Yeah. And who's seeking out this information? Obviously, we think about doctors and providers, but it kind of within this ecosystem, who does this really affect in terms of this access to information? Because obviously it affects the patient, but there's got to be more to it.
So my hypothesis is that because hospitals, EMRs, the software that hospitals run on, and insurance companies have all the data, everybody has to build things for them. They have to build technologies for them because the data is built on those technologies. If you can take the data outside of the payers and the providers and the EMRs and give it to entrepreneurs, they'll start building things for people, not
Yeah.
for large insurance companies, not for multi-state health systems. They'll build things for people. And we actually saw something really similar happen in the finance industry. Uh,
Mhm.
10 years ago, you could move $5 from your bank account to $5 at your friend's bank account, but it was really hard. You had to like log into your bank account and initiate a wire and like it had like a 99 cent or $5 fee to the exchange.
Yeah.
Then a company came around called Plaid. And some people don't know Plaid, but Plaid connected all the banks together, built an infrastructure. And guess what happened? We got Venmo, we got
Yeah.
Mint, we got Robinhood. And all of a sudden, instead of building a data exchange tool between two banks, we built a data exchange tool for consumers and everybody loved it and it worked really well and it solved a ton of problems.
Yeah.
So the hypothesis is if you can get the data outside of the incumbents in healthcare and give it to entrepreneurs, they're not going to build things for the incumbents anymore. They're not
Yeah.
going to fall into those efficiencies. They're going to fall into a new paradigm, consumer-oriented healthcare.
Yeah. And thinking about, obviously, I would love for you to kind of walk through particle health and what in particular the product does, but also how rich is that data that you're collecting? Are the data points giving us the information we need? And is it easy or is it challenging to categorize them? Because I always think like once you can categorize something and kind of conceptualize it, keep it organized, then you can utilize it. But it seems like maybe everyone has their own system.
No, you're totally right about that. So we do get a ton of data. On average, we find 155 unique files per patient we search for. So
Yeah.
like we get a full bundle of info. And this contains your diagnoses of your past and your lab results and your vital signs and your medications and your allergies and all the unstructured doctor notes. We get all of it. And we get all that data. In fact, our customer's biggest complaint is this is too much data. I don't know what to do with it. So then the next question is, okay, now you have access to it. How do I then make it usable? And to your point, first thing you need to do is you have to structure it and organize it and like label it, tag it. There are some standards in healthcare that people follow. It's called FHIR. It stands for Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources. And it's basically a way to structure healthcare data around a person. Not everybody follows it though. There's still a ton of variability. So at Particle, we had to build a data transformation pipeline that took all that variability and turned out one unified record that was the same every single time. So every single one of our customers doesn't have to deal with that variability anymore. They just get one standardized set per patient.
Yeah. And to get into the weeds of the technology a little bit, what are you're kind of building this aggregate that collects this information from all these different platforms. How do you build something that, for those who don't know, that connects with all these other really disparate technologies / softwares that people are using? Is it partnering with the solution companies or the clinics? Where do you go and how do you build? Or is the information out there and it's just up to someone to start putting it together and making it make sense?
We tried a lot of different avenues
Yeah.
of this and finally found one that worked. And so what we ended up doing is, thanks to some new regulation and policy, we were able to go to the EMRs and connect into them. And they technically couldn't say no to us. There's a rule called anti-information blocking.
Yeah.
And basically, like it sounds, it doesn't let the EMRs block access to information anymore. They used to do it a lot and they still do it a lot. Don't get me wrong. But because of that rule, we were able to go connect with them and start building our network of networks at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so through that, we now have access to about 320 million Americans' records.
Wow. And then describe just like the challenges thinking about HIPAA and compliance and all those things that you have to really kind of, I guess, even plan for, manage, bring other securities and technologies. How much is that part of the building process and how important do you have to like maintain and stay on top of whether it's new updates or breaches or things like that?
Yeah, I think from a security and compliance standpoint, we've had to invest a ton. We have to do all the certifications, SOC 2, high trust. I mean, these things take years and lots of money to do.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. It just is very expensive and time consuming. You have to do it and you want to do it, right? Like in order to be like a real player in the healthcare space, you have to like be top 1% in security and compliance.
Yeah.
As it relates to HIPAA, the funny thing about that, the P in HIPAA stands for portability. People think it stands for privacy. People think it stands for privacy. The HIPAA was intended to make healthcare records portable. And when they say portable, they mean if you go to a doctor, you should be able to get all of them to that doctor super, super easily with no problem. That was the point of HIPAA. And so it didn't obviously happen. People did not make data portable. And there's a lot of reasons why. Since HIPAA, which was in the 80s, I think it was, or 90s, I think it was Clinton that created HIPAA. There's been more rules that have further defined that portability piece. The most recent one is the one I was just referring to, anti-information blocking. And that is kind of like, it's an addition to HIPAA in many ways. So when you say, do we have to consider HIPAA at Particle? We are HIPAA. We are the digital manifestation of HIPAA. It's a way for consumers to make their data portable via technology. And so like, we're not breaking HIPAA. We are championing HIPAA.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I didn't know. I actually worked at a pharmacy for like 6 years as an independent pharmacy. So like the intimacy between HIPAA and compliance, I wasn't aware. Now I'm wondering about what I learned in those 6 years about the portability. But it makes sense because it's like a standardization access and record keeping, and it keeps really the goal, at least from what I understand, is to be able to share that information. But like you mentioned, it wasn't necessarily fulfilled. And I'm curious, and I would love to hear your response to this. In regards to like regulations and policies and a lot of these things that come out, it seems like healthcare founders, they have like a love-hate relationship with them. In some ways, like it grants them access and kind of protects them, in another way that limits them. What's your relationship as the policies come out, and is there any, I guess, risk at which you foresee something putting a barrier in front of your company?
I think the intent behind regulations is always great. The practical application of regulations is never great. In fact, like look at HIPAA as an example, right? It was meant to make data more portable and exchangeable, but organizations used it to lock data down and hide data. It's a scapegoat. And I think your time at the pharmacy is a common thing, right? Where the people that manage that pharmacy were probably saying something along the lines of, no, 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 don't share that data. It will violate HIPAA. But at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's actually violating HIPAA not to share it. People don't really get it. So the intent behind regulations are good, but the rollout's never that great. Information blocking is a really interesting one. It's new and it's pretty straightforward. It's basically saying if a patient requests their record through a technically feasible way, you have to return it. And even though that's a rule and a law today, you still can't do it. An interesting fact, when we run 1,000 queries through our API requested by doctors, we get about a 90% response rate from all these
Yeah.
EMRs. If you switch those doctors out with patients or consumers requesting their own record, we have a 0% response rate. The only thing changing is the person requesting it, you requesting it for yourself, or a doctor requesting it on your behalf. So this is where we are today. There's a rule that says don't block info, but they're full on total carte blanche blocking data today.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. And also thinking about in terms of how your product works, I'm curious because it all makes sense. Creating a better infrastructure to collect data, to distribute it, to understand. But who are your customers? Are they individuals who are seeking out their information? Are there providers that are seeking out the ability to communicate with one another? It seems like yeah, I'm just so curious who your customers are.
Yeah. So our customers are, I would call them non-traditional healthcare players. So
Okay.
they're not hospital systems, but they are diabetes apps with providers or telemedicine or care coordination platforms. There's a lot of these companies out there that are kind of adjacent to the traditional healthcare system and need to get plugged into it somehow. And so if you download an app and you have like a diabetes provider or coach or something on the other side, they need to know what your A1C level's on. They need to know what medications you're on. They need to know what other conditions you have. And the best way of doing it today is, hey, can you fill out a 3-page form? And
Yeah.
typically you either don't fill it out or you fill it out wrong, or you don't go take the trouble to go into your medicine cabinet and write down exactly the name of the medication. There's so many problems with that.
Yeah.
Plus it's not real time, right? Like we can update that application every time you go to a doctor and say, hey, a new encounter just happened. There's new information available. So this like more digital, systematized, virtual world of healthcare that's growing really, really fast doesn't have a way to connect with a traditional healthcare system. And we solve that problem for them.
So smart. So smart to partner with those companies who have the incentive to get better information, to actually service their customers. That's a really smart play, because I can see as that kind of expands and partner, kind of almost like a channel partner at some point in time, right? They continue to expand and grow the product. And how has that relationship been with working with, I'm sure, like a small cohort of customers and really going through the idea? What are some things that you built that weren't used as much as you thought or expected? And what are some things that you didn't expect to incorporate into the product that's there now?
I mean, when I started, I thought that if I built an API where you put in someone's name, all their records back, I'd like retire. I was like, this is like the best. This is like the biggest problem in healthcare. But then customers were like, well, it's good, but you're passing me back 155 different files and I don't know where the medication is in them. So then we had to spend another year like standardizing the data. And now I'm like, okay, we're ready to retire now. And then the customers are like, okay, wait, I'm really glad that you're standardizing the data, but I still need to get a list of medications and I want to be able to filter them by date and I want to filter them by a condition type. So, okay, so we have to build some more functionality. Now we're getting to the point where customers are like, okay, the data is really good. It's concise, it's filtered, it's clean, it's standardized, but I want some analytics on top of it. I want you to provide like a risk score, predictive analytics. So now we're like into this new world of AI,
Mm,
ML, insights. So like, the good thing is you move up the value chain, right? Every time
yeah.
you add a new layer of value. The bad part is like, there's just no bottom to this.
Yeah.
You just keep building better and better and better forever.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you kind of plan for that as a founder, seeing that the target, it gets hit sometimes, it changes, and it's very dynamic, being that, like you said, it could always be a better tool and contribute more to the clients that you're seeing. I'm sure even add clients that you haven't even thought about.
So I think there's three ways Particle grows. Number one is get access to different types of data. We've got really good
Mhm.
coverage on EMR data today, but there's also pharmacy data, claims data, IoT, genomics, determinants. We want to go get all that data and package it cleanly around one person. The second strategy is more advanced analytics and insights. Like AI is obviously having its boom moment right now, and we want to leverage that.
Yeah.
What if you could ask our API a question about a patient and we could go pull hundreds of those records and it could answer that question based on all that data that we find? That's like a really interesting kind of like analytics angle that is in vogue right now, but should persist for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the last strategy is give access to more stakeholders. One I never really thought of is life insurance. I didn't know a ton about life insurance, but every time you go sign up for a life insurance policy, they have to go collect your medical records. They have to make sure you're not going to like die tomorrow. And so that is done by fax machine today. And so we can offer a solution to the little problems like that. By the way, very large industry, like billions and billions of dollars to go after in
Yeah.
that space too. So there's like three strategies that I think we can go after to grow a lot
Yeah.
more.
And along with particle health, is anybody else doing something like this?
Yes, but in different flavors.
Yeah. Describe.
As you can imagine, healthcare is really big, right? So there's a lot of different angles you can go after.
Yeah.
You can go target EMRs, you can target digital health companies, you can target traditional hospital systems. I think the definition in my perspective of a competitor is fighting over the same customers.
Mm.
Like if you have the exact same product, but you're both going after different customers, you're not competitors. You're not competing for anything. So as the market matures, Particle and other similar companies are, I think, finding their own niches to go fit into.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone in particular, I guess in regards to the niche you're targeting, what makes you confident about how you're pursuing that, and when there's just kind of a blue sea of opportunity out there?
Our differentiation, really our North Star at Particle, is we think of data as our products. We don't have a UI UX. As a doctor, you can't log into Particle and like look at medical records. We're not going to build a UI UX. Our data is our product. That's where we're differentiated. That's where we're better than everybody.
Yeah.
And I think we can keep doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on that because it works really well.
Yeah. Yeah. And just thinking about, obviously, we talked about the company, we talked about the product, we talked about some exciting partnerships that you have so far, but tell us a little bit more about the traction you've seen as you've been building up to this point, and then what in particular you're excited about the next milestone for Particle.
So I think API companies have some really good benefits to them. I think one is when you implement an API, it can take a couple months. It's very sticky because
Yeah.
it's expensive for that customer now to rip out that API and find an alternative or do it themselves. So once you land a customer with an API, they're usually sticking around for a while. Number two is as that customer grows, so does the usage of the API and so does our revenue. So
Yeah.
we see a really good net revenue retention number, which is really important for an API company. And then the third thing is we can keep innovating behind the API and it doesn't impact the customer. What I mean by that is if they're pulling, I'm just going to make this up, medication data into their system from Particle's API, and we do a massive update on our system behind the API, and we now produce, I'm just going to make this up, but like a medication adherence risk score,
Hmm.
they don't have to do anything other than just call the API differently and get the risk score now. So we can keep getting better and better value to our customers without them having to buy something new or download a new app or retrain on a new tool. It's just easy to update and improve as we go with our customers. So it's it's I think API companies are special in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I asked it earlier, but just thinking about whether it's macro or external or internal, what are some of the biggest risks that you think Particle Health faces today?
So I mentioned earlier today we have a really good response rate for providers requesting data and a 0% response rate for consumers requesting their own data. I think in order for Particle to realize its true vision, we have to be able to get consumers to be able to access their own data.
Mhm.
And the hard part is it's not in our control. We do not have much like oversight on enforcing these regulations that exist today. And so there's a lot of work we can do to influence and champion, advocate for patient rights of access of their data, but we can't just like go force the biggest corporations in healthcare to go turn it on and respond to us.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest risk for Particle is it's not an if. I think consumers will have the right to access their data at some point in time. The rules are the rules, the law is the law. But when is the question? Is it going to be tomorrow? Is it going to be next year? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? How long do we have to wait to allow consumers to access their data? I was just in DC all last week, meeting with legislators and policymakers and committees and senators and representatives, because I was trying to understand, A, do they even know what's going on? Which most of them don't. And then B, what do we do to get this happening? Like, who do I have to talk to? Like, what has to happen?
Yeah.
And so it's frustrating because I've been building this company for 5 years on the promise of giving consumers the access that they deserve,
Yeah.
but have not been able to do it so far.
Yeah. And what would you propose as, is it a partnership? Is it a piece of legislation? Is it a piece of technology that needs to be upgraded? What do you think would give you the opportunity to do that?
It's enforcement of the rule. So
Mm,
like the law is set today. Don't block access to consumers, but nobody's getting punished for it right now.
yeah.
So under in the government, there's HHS, Health and Human Services, and under HHS are two groups: Office of the National Coordinator of Health (ONC), and then the OCR, the Office of Civil Rights. The Office of Civil Rights is the group that's supposed to be enforcing and making sure that these rules are in place, because it's your civil right to access your own healthcare data.
Yeah.
But today they're not doing it. They just don't have the funding or the prioritization to go after this.
Yeah. Yeah. If everything does go well, what's the long-term vision for particle health?
Consumer access will change everything. Like I talked
Yeah.
to you in the beginning of this, right? Like
Yeah.
I want to know what the Venmo of healthcare will be, what the Mint of
Yeah.
healthcare will be, what the crypto of healthcare will be. Like crypto wouldn't exist without Plaid, probably to the extent that it does. I'm not saying we do crypto for healthcare, but what like parallel big
Yeah.
amazing thing can we do in healthcare that we can't even imagine right now that some entrepreneur wants to build and can't build without Particle? That's what I want to
Yeah.
see.
It's
I
interesting.
have to see what's on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure you will. And it's fascinating to think about the parallels between those because it is just flipping the paradigm of who's being incentivized, who's being built, the technology is being built towards, who has access to that information. But it's everyone wants access to their own information to opt in or out of whatever program at will
Yep.
that have the freedom of that choice. And then also to have the technological efficiency of modern technology and kind of we're all used to just a high degree of usability from our refrigerator. I'm I
Yeah.
don't have one, but like you can have a live stream of what's in your fridge while you're at the grocery store. But that
Yeah.
ease of technology is incredible, and people are really kind of fighting for it in all industries, which is exciting. I like this next section. I call my founder FAQ. So I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire questions, and we'll see where we get. So
Okay,
first
cool.
question I always like to open it up with is what's particularly hard about your job day to day?
I think the hardest part is making hard decisions quickly
Yeah.
while simultaneously building consensus and understanding across the team. And what I mean
Yeah.
by that is if we're interviewing for, I'm just going to make this up, head of engineering, and we end up finding another candidate that is really, really good, but a VP level
Yeah.
engineer. And we want to make that hire because they're just a really good opportunistic hire. And we have to make that decision quickly. And then we do it. There might be someone on the team that was like, wait a minute, I wanted that job.
Yeah.
And you have to do what's best for the business, even to your own detriment, right? And to that point, I actually just hired a new CEO last week to replace me. And it's because I know it's better for the business. And I'm
Yeah.
still, we can go down this rabbit hole if you want, but
Yeah. Let's do it. I'm
you
curious.
have to, you have to put the company first in all things. And some people like, they have different weight on different pieces of the puzzle. So you
Yeah.
have to like
Yeah.
understand people. You have to be empathetic to people. You have to be a colleague to people, but you also have to make really hard decisions. And that's hard
Yeah.
sometimes, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm curious because from my experience, the titles are just kind of general descriptions and definitions of responsibilities and accountabilities for an individual within a company.
Yeah.
How does your day to day change and what's exciting? Because obviously you would do it if it benefits the business and you see a lot of progress. What's exciting about this recent shift in leadership and I guess in terms of who's kind of at the forefront?
Well, I mentioned earlier, like my mission when I started this company was, can you put someone's name in our API and get all their medical records back? And we did it. It's done. It's working really,
Yeah.
really well. And the company's in a great spot. This is a great time to say, what's our next mission? And the next
Yeah.
mission is AI, ML, analytics, insights, that whole world. That's not something I am a subject matter expert in.
Yeah.
So why would I hamstring this business by saying, I'm going to be the leader of this business. I'm going to learn 101 on this and just everyone's going to move
Yeah.
as slowly as I move
Yeah.
versus I'm going to step a little other way and bring someone in that's a freaking rock star in this stuff.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
so that's what I did. And like, you got
Yeah.
to swallow some pride a little bit, but at the same time, to your earlier question, it allows me to now take a step back and do the stuff I love doing and that I'm really good at. And
Yeah.
now I get to spend 100% of my time doing that stuff,
Yeah.
which is great.
Yeah. How last question on this topic, but how was that kind of process for you kind of going through it? Was this proposed to you? Did you think about it yourself? And once you kind of had this idea that there needed to be a shift in leadership, what made you confident in the person that you ended up hiring?
So like as a first time founder, I was always sharing and a lot with the board and I was very transparent and honest with the board. And I respect the hell out of my board. We have a really good group of people that are super smart, been around the block many, many times. So like I listen to them and I trust them a lot. And I think part of that conversation has been for a while, like at some point, I'm just probably not the best person on planet Earth to take particle from where it is to all the way to, to the moon. There's
Yeah.
probably somebody else out there that's better at getting us to the moon than me at some point in time. And that time kind of like we finished our mission where we land, we're kind of like hitting our numbers, we're in a good spot. And that's a better time to make a transition than when things are going badly.
Yeah.
And I kind of I got a little whiff in the air that like 6 months, 9 months, 12 months from now, I might be the bottleneck to
Sure.
this company.
Sure.
And so
Yeah.
before that happens, I would much rather proactively, peacefully, transparently, and respectfully make a transition.
Yeah, yeah. It's awesome to hear how kind of, and like you said, you kind of hear this transition, and a lot of people maybe because it's during when there's hard times in companies, think about it as a negative. But really, learning about your experience through it, it's such a positive in a way that this person picks up, where in this direction of this particular subject matter and expertise, and then in terms of using your strong suits, I think I feel like for a lot of founders who continue on with their companies that they're building, have this kind of mindset of putting people in place, utilizing the right skills, and really kind of almost cranking it up to the highest degree to get the most out of people. And it's
Yeah.
awesome seeing. Yeah.
I think like in order to be a successful founder, you have to be a little bit crazy, right? And I think the
Yeah.
core of that crazy is I can fucking, oh, excuse me, I can't swear, can I?
No, you're good.
The core of the crazy is I am the person that can do this. I am 100% confident that I'm going to get this company all the way. If you don't have that confidence, you're not going to be successful. So that is now counter to the concept of hiring someone better than you.
Yeah.
I think that's a really hard reconciliation for a lot of founders to make. The only reason I got the company this far is because I'm the man versus I got the company this far because I'm the man. And now it's time to hand it over to somebody else because they're the
Yeah.
new man. And that's a hard thing to do. You have to swallow pride and you have to be really
Yeah.
honest with yourself. And sometimes you're probably wrong too. But
Yeah.
I think a lot of the times you're right too.
Yeah. You said you spent some time in venture, and have you seen this transition go the opposite way? And what would be your reasons why these things maybe don't pan out so successfully?
I've seen several founders get ousted by the board.
Yeah.
And then there's a mad dash with a lot of friction to find a new CEO. And then the transition is bumpy, ugly, and has a bad outcome to it. I've seen in my lifetime one transition that was peaceful and was a smooth handoff, and the company did well.
Yeah.
And so that's a small sample size, but I think if there's going to be a transition which by the way, I think most companies, I think it's very rare that the founder is the actually best person to be the CEO forever. Like you look at the Mark
Yeah.
Zuckerbergs and it's very rare. And by the way, like with Mark Zuckerberg, I wouldn't even call him like the true CEO of the business. Like Sheryl Sanders came in there and like ran the freaking business.
Yeah.
But I think it's like so few and far between that a founder is the right person to go all the way.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times they'll do it anyway. Right? Like they're going to take it all the way no matter what. It's probably not the best path forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Thinking about, I love asking this next question because I love how founders extract knowledge out of anything that they ingest, whether it's books or people. Who would you say, or what would you say has impacted or influenced you the most?
I love The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Yeah, I'm reading that. I'm listening to that now on audiobook. Yeah.
Yeah. This is my favorite like startup business book.
Yeah.
It's got like, I remember the first time I like dog-eared like every other page. I was like, there's just so many little nuggets in here. But the concept of like peacetime, wartime was a really interesting one for me. Like, this is what a peacetime company looks like. This is what a wartime company looks like. And kind of the tactics and strategies on how to like switch back and forth when you need to.
Yeah. Yeah. And anyone in particular, your network, your circle, mentors, anyone in particular, leave you with something that's kind of stuck with you today as a founder?
Good question. I think there was, as a first-time founder in the early days, there was one piece of advice that I listened to very closely, and I think it worked well. That piece of advice was, if you're early stage, if you want money, ask for advice. And if you want advice, ask for money. And I think that is a very true thing to leverage when you're in your kind of first phase of building a business. There's an approach to investors and customers and other types of people that have, monetary exchange at the other end on how to do that approach. And I think that
Yeah.
adage is very true.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because it kind of reminds me when a lot of founders will go through like the customer journey and go through a lot of customer interview calls. It's like they essentially want their money at eventually, but they're rich of experience of having those conversations, building technology through that kind of accumulated data, and also building those relationships ends up being so profoundly more impactful as to your business than just trying to build something and trying to pitch it and sell it and go through this whole process. Such a learning and developmental kind of experience that is so cool.
Totally.
Awesome, Troy. Well, I know we're coming to the end of the show here, but I always like to ask, did we leave anything on the table? Any question I didn't ask you that I should have? Anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to bring up? I'll leave a second for your plugs and your LinkedIn and stuff, but any topical thing that we missed here?
I would just say, if you want access to your medical records and you can't file a complaint to the Office of Civil Rights.
Yeah, we'll broadcast that too. Actually, it'll be in the show notes. Yeah, I love that,
good.
Troy. Yeah, good. Troy, it's been such a pleasure learning about your experience as an entrepreneur, but also what crazy innovative idea particle health was in its conception, but how you've actually able to achieve your dream, and in terms of giving people access with one query request to their medical information and medical records. And it's exciting to see where the company will go and how further technology will add to its advancement and its benefit on not only its clients, but its people and everything like that. So, Troy, it's been such a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed yourself. And the last little bit is, where can we find you? Where can we support you? Give us your LinkedIn's, Twitters. Where can we be a fan?
Find me on LinkedIn, Troy Bannister, Particle Health.
Let's do it. Awesome, Troy. Such a pleasure having you. Thank you for joining us today on Behind Company Lens.
Thanks.